today's conversation. So, as you go through your slides, firstly, you'll see where the former administrator, Odie Donald, presented in his recommendation that there be money set aside for blight remediation for the purpose of trying to create an affordable housing product to complement that which is happening already through the Housing and Community Development Department, focusing on a lower income client with less affordability. So this is not something that is brand new, but it is expounded upon in this presentation. And we note in this presentation additionally that affordable housing or the creation of is an eligible activity under your American Rescue Plan Act. In fact, it's one of the items that was identified by the former administrator as the methodology by which we would get the funding approved through this body. It's necessary that at the end of the day, when you try to deal with blight, as we'll define it in this workshop presentation, that you have an end use for that particular piece of property. And so the creation of affordable housing, again, qualifies and pushes us in a direction already set up and planned for by ARPA funds. So why the land bank? Land bank authorities operate under the mission of taking tax delinquent, underutilized properties and getting them back on the tax roll. We do that primarily by working with small investors, in some instances looking at small mixed-use products, but most often looking at residential development. Sometimes that's new construction, sometimes that's acquisition rehab. Here, though, however, you're looking at an opportunity for the land bank in order to be able to work in the lead. And that's not uncommon across the country, but it is new for our state. There is only one other land bank, which is currently Metro Atlanta Land Bank, formerly Fulton Atlanta Land Bank, Mr. Chris Norman, that is elected to be a lead developer to help his community deal with blight, as we'll define it. If you don't put someone into that lead position in order to be able to carry that blighted, vacant lot, dilapidated structure, or abandoned home all the way to homeowners' hands, be that investor or primary residence homeowner, you're always going to have something in the community financially that the government is responsible for. And we'll go through how that's going to be impacted. So Center for Community Progress, you've heard that name associated with our organization before. They're an advocacy and lobbying group for land banks across the country. They recently moved to the Atlanta office and established permanent residence there for the Georgia region in order to be able to support the land banks in our state. They have helped to redefine what blight is. Blight is not just the aesthetics of a house and that it looks bad or the overgrowth of the lot. It is three specific categories that they call VADs. It's vacancy, abandonment, and dilapidation. Why those specifically? Because vacancy means that you don't have people in communities. Abandonment means that the owner is no longer contributing to the remediation of the structure itself. And dilapidation is what is happening to the community and neighborhood as a whole. So you get neighborhood decline. Every time I leave a property in a community and refuse to follow code ordinances in order to mothball it rather than just boarding it up, let it fall apart, let the lot get overgrown, you get a 311 call. Because that neighbor needs the yard cut, needs the vagrants taken care of, needs the squatter removed, needs the rats to be terminated, they need the structure to be demolished, but you also don't collect taxes to adjust for those fees. And it's a never-ending cycle because no one's putting the investment back into the property. Additionally, it's a cycle for the people who live in the community as well. Not only because they gotta live with the structure or live with the lot, but it also affects their bottom line and value. And HUD's already looked at this. So the Office of Policy and Development and Research has already said that not only does the government have a cost in communities, those that we just described, but also neighbors lose. Approximately 20% of the potential value of my home is decreased by that house. Approximately 20% of the value and assessment that you would then collect taxes on is lost because of that lot. So you're spending money and I'm losing money. What does that do for the property owner when we talk about taking pride in the community and keeping it clean? What does that do for individuals where they say idle hands mean for idle minds, where there's opportunities for crime because these abandoned structures exist? What does that mean for young people who are supposed to care about their community when they're left living in these kind of conditions? And those problems multiply generationally. We say that we should pull ourselves up by bootstraps when we have boots that have holes in them, and we leave those boots for people to wear. We've got to change that. And the only way to change it is to actively put money behind the remediation of blight so that you can create communities that people care about to invest later themselves. Now, one thing you did do, in partnership with the land bank, several city departments, just came up with a blight ordinance in order to try to hold property owners accountable. The difficulty is that we elected not to challenge state law, as advised, and it was the correct route for that first step. But the accountability stops for those individuals that don't live in our community. Accountability also stops for those structures that have residents within them. So you're unable through your blight ordinance in order to help the renter that has a derelict property owning landlord, and you're unable to punish the person that lives across a county line or across the river.
Could you?
Yes, sir.
Could you expound on it a little bit more? What are some of the situations? Because I've been to a property and basically you look at it, you call the marshal's department, hopefully somebody come out and look at it. What can we do to better that situation? Because I know I had a situation, had a young lady, she was terrorizing the neighborhood, come to find out the owner was in California somewhere. He had to call the owner in California to try to get some relief. He couldn't get a hold of him. What can we do with that?
Okay, so.
And
Yes, sir.
and I'm asking you that, but if you'd rather that we hold them to the end, just let me know, but go ahead.
Address that 30,000 foot and then expound. So 30,000 foot, you started the process of trying to address that. Because minimally, for those property owners that have properties that are deemed blighted through your ordinance, that then get the tax assessed on it at the 7 times value, that if they choose to pay the tax, have put money into your coffer to deal with that structure through the demolition, condemnation, and demolition process. It doesn't give you control of the land, but it does remove the structure. So that's one step. If in the event that house is deemed blighted through your current ordinance and the property owner does not then pay the taxes once it's assessed, you still can move it through your standard condemnation and demolition process. Now, you didn't collect that taxes to help with the pot, but you have some funds designated already to deal with demolition. A great thing about what we're presenting today is that we're going to ask, as part of this request, a multiplier to your demolition line item so that you can take more of those structures down when we get into the budget section. Now, what I wanted to point out on this slide is just the level of collaboration that you've already seen. I'm sorry, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. The level of collaboration you've already seen. Okay.
Were you through with your examples for my colleague just a minute? Are you going to move on to something else? Okay. Let me ask you a couple of things. Let me ask Ms. Bonner first. Have anybody seen our attorney?
No, he's supposed to send somebody though, because he's not here.
Okay.
Is he out there?
If I can answer questions if you need me.
Well, I just, probably
Yeah,
I just need to look at you, know you're here. Get the chair over here.
There you go.
Okay, thank you, sir. But my question, based on what you was, and answering my colleague's question, does it make sense? Because what we don't have, along with that ordinance that you mentioned, we don't have one that deals with absentee landlords. Is that an important part of this process? Because other words, when I say absentee landlords, because you addressed that, is it too late for us, or do you recommend, based on what you're saying, that we create a program, institute a program, and make contact with that absentee owner to try to give us a local contact for this property, or do you think that's necessary?
Well, so when the blight ordinance panel was put together, that ad hoc committee came together in order to give a recommendation to former Administrator Donald to present to you. We looked at what state law limits were, and based upon your law department's review, recommendations from your planning director, it was follow the law as a first step. You have the opportunity to then look at what happens next step as you add to that ordinance. It was a great first step to take to put some teeth behind it to hold folks accountable who will pay taxes or who do live here. But you do have that opportunity with your law department to look at what comes next for those that are outside of the existing ordinance, because it will be a pushback to the limit of state law currently. So I think that that may be best advised as you talk with your legal department to say, if I want to go after people who don't live in my community, what steps would this body then have to take?
You mentioned, what is it, Chris Norman in Atlanta?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned him about being one of the only land banks in the state of Georgia that's being kind of aggressive in terms of what you're presenting us today. What is he doing in regards to that, which we're discussing it right now?
So once that tax is in place, be it you choose, okay, let me back up. Once the tax is in place, property owner doesn't pay it. You do that 7 times multiplier because you've deemed their property blighted, and they decide not to pay it. One of the reasons that we needed to have a legal in the room and ensure that it was called a tax and not a fee is because then it is a foreclosable amount that the land bank then can go after the structure. So because it will be a tax on the tax bill, we then can foreclose on it through the judicial and rem process in partnership with the tax commissioner's office, and we can take possession of that property.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes,
All right, and I just want to add something. We have a process now, I think it takes about 2 years to take a property right now. So, we talked about trying to get it to 1 year. I'm not sure if that's your office or if that's Mr. Johnson's office, tax commissioner, but we need to start that process also. We need to know which way we need to go with that.
Yes, sir. So the intergovernment agreement between the Land Bank Authority and the commission is that we will wait 2 years before starting a tax foreclosure process. However, state law allows for us to move at 1 year. At the time of that being ratified, 1996, that was the posture, is that there would be a 2-year window to allow individuals the opportunity in order to be able to pay their taxes. But at any point in time that this body chooses, you have the ability to take that from 2 years to align with the state and go down to 1, and that would allow us to move forward that much more quickly.
Okay. I guess Mr. Johnson wants to say something?
And just to add what Sean has said, that is the judicial in rem process. Currently, with the judicial in rem process, which means that the tax commissioner is suing the taxpayer in superior court, our local ordinance says that before we do that, the property must be at least 2 years delinquent. Now, again, that's a local ordinance, and so this body has the opportunity to change that and go with state law, which only requires 1 year. So which is what we do in our non-judicial process. But currently, if we were going to do judicial in rem process, which is what the land bank uses, which is what we would have to do in order to get the property out of the name of the original owner, we would need to change that local ordinance so that it only requires 1 year, which follows state law.
Thank you.
Okay. So I just want to take a moment on this slide just to reiterate the fact that you've already had collaboration of multiple city departments with local authorities in order to try to be able to bring you not only this current iteration that is your blight ordinance, but on 3 separate occasions prior to that, where we've talked about blight in this community. You no longer have departments working in silos trying to figure this out. We now collaborate extremely well to try to be able to deal with the blight in the community, the need for affordable housing, and how do you transform that into future home ownership, because we understand that Richmond County has to grow. In all ways, as we see economic development opportunities coming into the area, we understand that working together collaboratively helps everyone. But when it comes to housing starts, you have to be a little bit selfish, because those taxes are what directly feed your ability to service your residents. So we do want industry to continue to grow in Aiken County, and we do want to continue to see new jobs created in Columbia County, and we do want new industrial opportunities in Burke. But when it comes to housing, everybody's got to draw their line. And we understand as your employees that we're here to be the tools to help you accomplish that. So conceptually, although we're using the title as noted in former Administrator Donald's presentation to you last year, affordable housing, what we're introducing is a concept called living wage housing. Living wage is basically a calculation of an individual within their community, what they make and what the cost of living are there. And then what is the product that they have to have in each of the quality of life indicators? What level of health care can they actually afford? What level of education can they actually afford? What level of housing can they actually afford? It is not the conversation around how do you increase a household's income to get them to your benchmark. It's how do you adjust your benchmark to their existing income. And if that's even possible based upon cost of materials, cost of labor, cost of services, and in some instances, some cities have seen that it's not. National Low Income Housing Coalition has evaluated cities all across the country, and they've realized for cities like Nashville and Memphis and Atlanta, being those large cities in the southeastern region, it's not going to be possible. You can't be a city employee living in Nashville and afford to live in Nashville. It's already been decided that they've gentrified their workforce out. But they're a growing city that's seeing a lot of industry, a lot of tourism, and what they would deem prosperity, understanding that the people who provide the services for the tourists, the people who clean the streets, the people who clean the buildings, the people who work to make sure that street lights are operating and that streets are paved, can't even afford to stay there. Now that could be Augusta, where we say the growth is worth that amount of change. Or we could be a city like Macon and Columbus that's evaluating to say, is that the right path for us? It may be unavoidable. I'm not saying that we have the solution. We have a recommendation of what we've seen other cities try, and they, like us, may or may not make the difference because prices are going up, and this is inflation, and people are talking about a potential recession. But the reality is if you don't make an intentional step, you're going to be swept over by this wave. So let's look at our residents. Richmond County website says first year teachers, 0 years experience will start at $42,203 a year. This is 0 years experience, but this is having a bachelor's degree. The idea of affordable housing says 30%, I'm killing this microphone, 30% of your area, 30% of your household expense should, okay, get your talking point. 30% of your income should be your housing expense. But living wage says you have to look at what the individual is also paying in order to be able to assess what they actually can afford. So you got to look at your community and its costs. If I looked at living wage housing for that first year teacher and I took into account that she was going to more than likely have to do an FHA loan, she just got the job, so job experience is a factor. Her monthly income is just over $3,500. FHA, for those in the mortgage industry, has this thing called a back-end ratio where the total of all of your bills is supposed to be no more than X. Well, I've got X in your presentation. That amount minus the real bills that she has to pay says that she should have a mortgage of $842. That's living wage. The most you can get minus what you know you got to handle, this is what you should be living in. Well, that 30% model says, well, no, you can look at just the income, and that's the housing expense. It doesn't take into account eating or water or childcare because that gives you a higher number. And it's not that that methodology is wrong. That's HUD standard. But when you start to look at what people can truly afford, if you're not going to go all the way down to net income, and calculate Christmas gifts and vacations, then you've got to use a metric that at least can be community-wide that doesn't stop at gross, because we don't live on our gross. We don't survive on it, and we're realizing right now that that calculation doesn't make sense when eggs and milk and gas go up. Her $842 payment when she pays taxes, pays insurance, homeowners insurance, pays her PMI, private mortgage insurance, because it's an FHA loan, is $107,500 house. Now, as hard as Mr. Welcher and his team would work, he cannot build a $107,000 house, scratch that, sell it at that price without ridiculous levels of subsidy to make it work for her family. He would have to throw money into the fire to build new for this, because the cost is just exuberant. Contractors are going to charge what they charge. The subs are going to charge what they charge. Materials cost what they cost. So you would be putting the pressure on him to figure this out by giving away money to meet this family's need. But this is a teacher that works at Laney or Josie or Davison. The way to get to her is through rehabilitation, not new construction. ACS data is more up to date than your census data. ACS data says individuals in our community 2021 make just above their first year teacher, $46,000. Maxing out using living wage, they shouldn't be in a house that costs more than about $133,000. You've got builders right now, Aiken County, Columbia County, that will tell you they can't build a townhouse for $150,000, let alone sell it at that price. How do we help those individuals, average income, working class, not on subsidy, not on all the stereotypical levels of support, afford home ownership? We do it through a rehabilitation model. It's the only way you can get there. It takes the blighted structures out of your community. It does something with the overgrown lots and the abandoned houses. It gives you money on the tax base, and it puts new home ownership in the neighborhoods. So what's our strategy to do this? The land bank already has the ability, as my chairman already explained, through the judicial and RIM process to acquire property using that tax foreclosure and therefore lawsuit against the property owner. We do it every day. You may have noticed either in the media or by checking the city's website about our inventory, we've almost doubled it in the past 18 months. We're constantly taking properties in, preparing for this moment to have inventory ready to go upon your approval and release of these funds. Additionally, it automatically aligns, again, with what Rescue Plan Act was designed for. It's to deal with the issues coming out of pandemic, and one of those is housing stability, where you don't get much more stable than ownership. So we're in a position in order to specifically target where development's already happening. Again, we're working in partnership with several city departments. Hawthorne Welcher sits as an advisor on my board. I formerly worked in his department. I know exactly where he's building at. We feed investors to him now, but we can just be one of the folks that follow that normal pattern. We can work in the places that the investor can't find the margins. We can take on the structures that those developers are going to pass by, that they would ask the city or they would ask code enforcement's department specifically to tear down so that they can clear the landscape in order to be able to build new housing. Well, while they're building new, why couldn't we be cleaning up the old? Additionally, we've already started the conversations with investment groups. Groups large enough by way of their financial capacity that they could buy our city up. But they're stopping at our table to have the conversation with us of how can they be partners rather than coming in and taking over. Now, as I said at the beginning, most of our customers are small, but some of our customers as of late are not. They are 20 and 30 and 50 and $100 million capacities. And they don't have to work with land banks. They can private market, but they're willing to work with us now. Yes, sir.
You have a question, Mr. Hassan?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Edwards, you just mentioned you have investors who have deep pockets, and what you're presenting to us is like rehabbing homes as well as tearing down blighted properties, potentially making them available so that Mr. Welcher's, Director Welcher's office can put new homes on those landscapes. So is all of that right I just said?
Yes, sir. So the vacant lots would be opportunities for new, and the derelict houses would be opportunities for rehab. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So now my question becomes, are you saying to us that these deep pocket investors are prepared to invest in rehab homes
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, specifically.
and make them affordable to this $42,000 first-year school teacher as well?
Yes, sir, and I can tell you why that's become the trend. So, having a chance to talk with several venture capital group leads, heads, some instances representatives overrepresenting themselves, we've put ourselves in a spot to be able to find out where the money is starting to go. Big unit projects are not as appealing in market as they once were. You drop 300 units in a building, you carry one loan, one debt service. You've got to keep a certain occupancy rate, or the loan itself can be subject to new conditions. Reason being is because the bank wants to be assured that the investor is going to be able to cover that loan amount, that debt on the building. You take that same 300 units and you scatter it, you offer the opportunity to venture capital groups to invest in each individual property. So it's much more appealing to get 300 houses and package those and bundle and sell them on the market than a 300 unit building. Because if this one house fails, I'm still good because I have 299 more.
So who would choose the client, the potential homeowner? Who would make that selection process?
Okay, so as we get into budget, we talk about our partnerships, but since the question was asked, we've already been speaking with our relationship with CSRA EOA. They've got a great homeownership prep program, pre and post. We've already been having conversations with Security Federal, who has established a new homeownership program in partnership with EOA to undergird it. We're also continuing our discussions with all of our HUD-certified home housing counseling agencies. So we want to make sure our pipeline comes in with people who not only have the training on what homeownership means, but also will have some financial supports that come in. EOA has an IDA program, which is a 2-for-1 match on down payment assistance. Security Federal is already looking at another opportunity in order to be able to leverage that. And at the state level, you still have Georgia Dream in place. So we think that we'll be able to build a pipeline very fast because they've already got clients. I sit as an advisor on one of their Hope Council boards. We've got clients that have approved mortgages that can't find properties.
Do that part again, the last statement.
We've got homeowners right now qualified with loans who have savings in the bank and a 2-for-1 match on their down payment that can't find a house.
Are they looking for a house in this price range, though? If they got resources already?
So your loan amount dictates your price range.
Exactly.
And they are looking to try to find something that meets that loan amount, and it doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Now, we've looked at the average income.
Yes.
We've looked at the average price of a home that they're able to afford with taxes and fees incurred. Now, my question is, they have to pay homeowners insurance, which is another expense.
Yep.
What happens when they buy their home and they're locked into a 30-year loan rate at a certain dollar that they can afford at this particular time?
Yep.
And what happens when they get a reappraisal on their property that just happened in Augusta and their property taxes go up $300, $400, $500, $600 more? What's the parachute that will be put into place that when these people can't afford a higher house payment, what parachute do we have in place to keep them in that home?
Fantastic question. So when you do intensive housing counseling, not credit counseling is what I used to do when I was a loan officer. I would tell you enough of the things you had to get off your credit to get the loan so I can get you a deal so I can get a check. You get into housing counseling, especially pre and post, you learn about those increases and fluctuations because you own the property now. But when you go in with a budget that is based upon real world expenses in year one, having to demonstrate savings from your net income already, you already know how to manage expenses. And you've already been trained on those expenses increasing because your house is going up in value the moment that you close on it. I just had to send a screenshot to someone yesterday when I had a change on mine. And even though the fact that the chief appraiser for the assessor's office is one of my board members, I got to pay my taxes too. $1,300 a month to $2,900 a month. Excuse me, a year. Month, I would have moved. But what you do in those instances is you ensure that there's proper education and training, that there are opportunities in order to remove expenses that are not necessary, and put your individual in a place where they're already used to saving the nest egg. They on the front end will have no less than $2,500 in the bank. So there's one to kind of help soften a blow. But they've also learned to budget on the existing income to put $2,500 away every year. So if I need to have an extra $200 toward the mortgage, well, it just means I don't get to put it in the savings account anymore. We also have to keep in mind that these are individuals that are also being trained on wealth creation because that's what home ownership is for working class people. It is not just the roof over your head and your pastor putting oil on the door. It's what you will leave to your children. And it's the only real opportunity through that equity creation and that growth that you're going to leave something of value outside of a life insurance policy. We won't put persons in situations setting them up for failure. Now, circumstances come along, pandemics happen, and things can change. But in normal situations, in a normal environment, these persons will be ready for the challenge of home ownership.
Okay, to follow up, and thank you, but to follow up, how many people can actually, even though they're trained in homeownership, they're trained in budgeting, they're trained in this, they're trained in that, there's not too many people on $42,000 a year before net can save $2,500 a year. So we're still looking at a problem that, just like you said, COVID comes along, unexpected hospital expenses come along, a lot of different things come along, and you can't budget for that. You can't prepare for that. So there again, what happens?
So I push back a little bit there, Commissioner. When I worked for not one but two mortgage companies when I first moved to Augusta, Richmond County, 2004, October, it was a subprime market, but I put dozens of residents in your county into homes that made far less on higher interest rates than current market, knowing that they would not have the opportunity once those adjustments happen to be able to afford their house, not because the property tax is going up $2,400 a year, but because the interest rate was going to go from 2.5 to 7.3. You can get a person into a house on any income if you're a loan officer that's savvy, because you're just going to reduce the price point of the house. That's not our goal, is to put people in homes. Again, we're dealing with an economic issue that is blighting your community, and we're creating a pathway to home ownership to deal with that blight. So we've got to make sure they're successful on the back. Now, what you are describing is the unforeseen that no amount of training or planning can plan for. But you can be ready for a game under normal circumstances by reviewing tape. We've looked at all the tape. If she needs to be at a house that costs 107 because she's able to do her savings at 107, then you don't let her buy at 109, no matter how nice the kitchen is. You can afford a $107,000 house. And when you prove that to folks, as I had to do when I got out of the private mortgage industry and started working for a nonprofit bank, if you're serious about the future, you will make the necessary adjustments. I had teachers in Richmond County schools. I had students just graduating, getting their first job. I had working professionals that was at Bridgestone, that worked at Solo Cup Company, formerly at the old Sugar Company, people that were just working class folks that we were able to put into homes and still maintain their savings. It is possible to do that. Now, you might need the $85,000 condo. My now wife, at the time fiance, had to buy an $85,000 condo. That's what you can afford working at Department of Juvenile Justice for 7 years. But if you're serious about buying a house, you get what you can handle. We want to create more opportunities that you can get a little bit more for that dollar amount. But if folks are serious about the idea of home ownership, these are starter properties. I get that. This is not going to be the home that they die in. They're going to inevitably sell it. But you start where it's smart. My first car wasn't my current car. My first suit wasn't this current suit. But you can jump out there, as the housing crisis showed us. And individuals like who I used to be will take advantage of it and walk away with a check.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Edwards. Thank you for the questions to the Commissioner. I've got a series of questions. I'll start with a comment first, and that is that it is appropriate for the pastor to put oil over the door.
Yes, sir.
And when necessary, a mezuzah works as well.
What kind of oil is that?
Anointed.
No, you hope, right?
Yeah, yeah, it works as well. It's symbolic of the blood of Jesus. We put blood over the doorpost, and the death angel rides over. So that's your church soliloquy for today. To that end, are you advocating, Mr. Edwards, for a rental model? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you lean into that?
So the ambition is to create homeowners, because again, it's not just about housing. It's about dealing with blight remediation. I need to put individuals in communities that are going to be long-term residents so that they can help to turn what these communities look like. It's not that the renter doesn't care about their level of existence, but the homeowner is vested because you got a debt on your back. So it's a greater likelihood that there'll be less trash in the yard, or that there won't be the tires on across the street, or there won't be the derelicts that are on the block, because this is what I'm paying for, not just this is where I'm staying. This will inevitably lead to community pride so that we then can see change in these neighborhoods within the urban core.
I have a series of other questions, but I'll pause. I'll let you continue your presentation.
Thank you, sir. So let's get into the budget.
Chair recognizes the commissioner from the second for a series of questions. Commissioner Williams.
I didn't ask for it.
Okay. All right. If you'll. Yeah, you'll push your button. Thank you, sir. All right. Continue.
Yes, sir. So going into the budget, don't want to, well, let's just go into the budget. Firstly and foremost, one step that we've already planned for and preparing for presentation to you is having the necessary conversations on our internal. $2,500 used to be our attorney's fee to move forward with a judicial and rem foreclosure. All of our investors know that. And $1,000 was the fee for admin and application. For this program, for these funds, it's necessary that everybody roll back. So the $1,000 fee charged by the land bank, of course, makes absolutely no sense to pass on to these individuals that are helping us with these blight conditions. And our attorney has said that is not necessary that $2,500 be the amount that is charged. And therefore, for every property that we do the judicial and rem foreclosure on using ARPA funds, that's coming down to $1,500. So I've got an opportunity with that negotiation with just $120,000 to foreclose and clear title on approximately 80 structures. I took in 131 at the October non-judicial sale that we'll be able to borrow the right to redeem on starting November 1st. And within 60 days, 75 days after that, be in a position then that we can go ahead and get started with this part of that process of making sure that we've got marketable title in order to then go ahead and recruit for rehabilitation. I'm saying here, we're ready now to go ahead and get started on the 80 properties we plan to deliver. Of that, we also know that we're going to need to deal with the community in which those structures are in. So we're setting aside money to partner with code enforcement and environmental services so that we can clear landscape. Some houses will be able to be saved. Some houses need to be removed. Right now, you've got over 100 properties on code enforcement's list that are condemned that environmental services can't even afford to push over. So what does it do when we get to a position when judicial and rem is complete? We then can go ahead and have properties ready to be rehabbed, have money in budget in order to help environmental services clear the landscape of the stuff that needs to come down, and then can sit with Hawthorne as he sits with developers and say, okay, I got 3 lots you can build new on, Sean's got 4 that he's gonna rehab, and then they're gonna tear the rest of this stuff out. You change the block. You go back to that ideal set up by HUD to say how a vacant property negatively impacts the amount of assessed value of those homeowners that are still there. What do you do for the 2 or 3 or 5 families on a block when you can clear the rest of it out, rehab several homes and give them new neighbors, and then build new properties on the exact same area? You change the landscape. And that's just starting. We know we're gonna have to maintain lots. Everything isn't gonna be built new immediately in partnership. We get that. And so we've got a line item in here in order to make sure that we can continue to cut grass so that you don't get phone calls saying, I need this grass cut. Additionally, you're not supposed to have houses just boarded up. In fact, our planning department has a code that says it's not supposed to be more than 6 weeks. It should be properly mothballed. It should be vented. Toilets, tubs, sinks should be removed and sealed. Property should be locked from the inside so that you can't have individuals breaking in. We want to make sure that we comply with planning, and we mothball the structures that we can't get to immediately so you don't create opportunities for crime or individuals to stay in them. But it also makes them look a whole lot better if you can cut the grass and cut away the trees and have a house nice, neatly boarded next to one you're rehabbing. That way when folks come see the rehab house, they can say, oh, you get ready to do this one next, as opposed to it still looking in its present condition. So again, partnership. We're taking the lead from departments and their ordinances already in place to ensure you that we're going to be doing the right thing with these funds. The rehabilitation, we talked about it. That line item gives us about 40 to start with. Here's how we're gonna make that happen. We go back to the partnership piece. We're already talking to investment groups that have huge dollar amounts with very specific margins that they wanna cover. We put ourselves in a spot where a portion of the funding comes from the land bank and a portion coming from them. It's very easy for us to get to that 80 mark fast, but we're gonna do it right so that we can ensure that the right individuals are going into these properties, that they're going to be able to maintain them, to Commissioner Clark's concerns. And so we'll look to start initially with about half the number, approximately 40 homes that we'll be bringing into this inventory. Investors, again, are ready to be able to also complement this. We don't have to do every rehabilitation. When we acquire the property, we can go ahead and do what is our normal course of business, sell it to somebody that's going to responsibly get it done in an 18-month period based upon our policies, and they can do the whole project. We've also gone through the necessary effort to say, how do we help individuals make the properties even more affordable? In other places, they call them affordable housing funds or affordable housing trusts. We didn't want to put that affordable word on it. We want it to just be a housing trust fund, which we will make sure is built into the potential resale value of every house, because that allows our private industry partners to help lend support. We've already had the Center for Community Progress, their legal department, one of their fellows to look at state law, and funding can be donated directly to land bank authorities. So we're gonna hit up our local banks, and we're gonna see how invested they are in helping to clean up our community. They don't have to put money into a project, they don't have to put it into a particular site, they can put it into the trust fund. That way it allows for an even more affordable home for that homeowner in the end. It's already being done in Savannah, it's already being done in Atlanta. In fact, Savannah model tripled their investment from the city just doing trust fund. We talk to Martin Freddie all the time, who came out of Macon, Georgia, and now runs their housing department there. This is a very easy thing to get done through a land bank that can just take it as a write-off. Commissioner Clark's other concern, how do you get them ready? They're already going through housing counseling. Let's beef that up. Let's support the organizations that are HUD-certified housing counseling agencies so that they can make sure that pre- and post-counseling are intensive enough that in the greatest likelihood, these individuals will be successful. We're already planning that at least 60 persons from the beginning will start that process preparing for pipeline. So again, we've got people that are qualified today, but they might have got qualified last year and just couldn't find a house. Let's make sure they know what the circumstances and the conditions of the community are in this environment so that they're even more prepared. So we've got a line item in this budget proposal or recommendation so that we can support those organizations to ensure the best of our clients come out first, and those that need the most work, they've got funding to help further support. Program administration and project oversight are just the cost of doing business. There is no way that singularly Lisa and I will be able to do everything we're presenting to you. We are going to have to increase our staff some. But this line item shows a budget that's going to carry us for 4 years, because the next infusion of funding we plan to stand before you on is when you release SPLOST 8 funds in 2026. I don't plan to come back because I don't plan to fail. So what's the ask? Your next committee, we'll answer any questions, concerns today. But we think that the community is ready for this body to directly infuse capital into an effort to deal with this blight issue. If not exactly as we proposed, as you revise and then support. And immediately thereafter, we will ask the commission to support that committee and vote for these funds to be released. I'll take any other questions you have.
You got it? You want me to get it?
Mayor Pro Tem.
No, I was, are these funds that Mr. McDowell had already found for you?
Yes, sir.
The $2 million?
So your original recommendation had 1.1, but we've confirmed that this amount is available. 2 million is available.
2 million is available through what?
To be allocated and released for the purpose of the land bank moving forward with this plan.
Is that ARP money?
Yes, sir. Rescue Plan Act.
Okay.
Commissioner from the first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions. Mr. Edwards, you said that 2 million is available from ARP. I only see $1 million for blight and affordable housing. Where's the other $1 million coming from?
So you received just about $84 million split into 2 tranches, one for city level, one for county level. These conversations have been had over a series of months about what was allocated and what has been spent. And in putting together this presentation in order to ensure that we were going to be able to give you success, $1.1 million was not going to do what was outlined. So we were encouraged to ask for what we need to be successful.
Okay, follow-up question, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a pretty good presentation, but I just have a few questions. What are your priority areas for this type of rehabilitation?
So your greatest amount of tax delinquencies in your urban core, but everybody doesn't want to live downtown. We are your land bank for the entirety of the county, and that ain't just City of Augusta, that's Hesper and Blythe as well. We plan to look at the greatest opportunity to get the best properties for rehabilitation because that's going to be a quick turnaround and potentially a little bit better on the sales price. But we also want to work in partnership based upon where development's already happening. So we are going from the river to the county line.
Okay, and that, I mean, good answer, because, you know, we talk a lot about South Augusta and the need for affordable housing in South Augusta, so I hope that will be on the radar as well. I'm curious to know, with this development and the plan, like I said, I think this is a good model. What would this do for someone who's been living in the area for, say, 40 years, 30 years? They're on a fixed income, but now they're starting to see houses in their vicinity get developed into newer homes. What would that do for that property owner? What would that do for their taxes? Would they be able to still sustain their homes in that area?
Yes.
Or would they see a rise as well?
Okay, so great question. So we've had this conversation because, again, the chief appraiser for the assessor's office is one of my board members, as you well know. We've looked at what they call like kind. So new construction, when it's coming out of the ground, it's not like kind. My great example is Miss Minnie. Miss Minnie's house is an existing structure, so new construction is not like kind, and the assessment of that newly constructed house and its valuation is not a direct reflection on what her evaluation will be the following year. It's still housing, but it's not the exact same type. In addition to that, if she's been there for 30 or 40 years, as my chairman can confirm, she may be eligible in order to be able to reduce her tax debt based upon her allowances based on her age. But when we go in with rehabilitation, it is going to be an existing housing stock now improved compared to her existing housing stock. However, we're not shooting for prices that are $250,000 and $300,000 with this program. That is not to say that Richmond County does not need that type of offering, because we do have people in this community that do want that level of home. But when we're selling houses for $100,000 and her improvement value is 89, we've not created such a gap that she should now have an insurmountable obstacle. The end, when we improve the community, we are going to see a rise. That's the ambition, because again, we are using housing as the tool to deal with blight, which drains resources economically. Our goal is to get your communities to a higher level to generate more taxes so that you then can provide more services. But we're not going to jump her from an $80,000, $70,000, $60,000 valuation based upon what we do to $300,000. That's not going to be realistic.
Understood.
Yes,
and
sir.
I guess my concern, I don't know if it's a concern as much as it's just something that we should keep on the top of our minds, is that how can we avoid getting into this position to where we're having good intentions? We want to make sure that housing is affordable for folks. How can we avoid having just the market do its job? Like how can we avoid the inevitable, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because we know that if we go with the Grand Boulevard, we see dilapidated housing, we apply this program, but then speculation kicks in, other developers from outside know something is coming, the market is rising. How do we avoid other efforts from leading us into having folks like Ms. Minnie, her property taxes going up, or the surrounding increasing so well, to a now that she is eventually priced out, maybe not by our efforts, but by the efforts around us. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
How do we avoid going down that road?
So part of what the land bank is proposed to do here is take control of the inventory. Now, we can't stop the hand-to-hand private transaction. Those are happening right now. City of Augusta approved the application of a choice neighborhood grant, and we were awarded last year. Several of your city departments are a part of that effort to bring forth this transformation plan that's going to directly impact those residents in the Allen Homes neighborhood, but also the Laney Walker and Harrisburg communities under that HUD planning grant that we're working through right now. The moment that got announced, money started coming in from everywhere. We are all aware that the Renaissance Apartments recently sold and now has recently resold. You can't stop the individual transaction, but if you can put enough of a cap on what's available with levels of control, then you can hold developers and investors accountable. And some that have sat with us that again have the pockets that they didn't need to, have been willing to abide by our rules. We changed our policies and procedures with a board-approved motion last year that we have part of that being community engagement. Part of what we do when we sit with an investor is find out exactly what they're trying to do and their impact on those around them. Now, do I want to see nice homes being? Of course we do. But simultaneously, we got to make sure there's something for everyone. You hear that all the time. This is one more step, one more tool for you to be able to ensure that everybody's got a place.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner from the first. I want to hear from Administrator Dowse, and then I'm going to go back to my series of questions.
I wanted to make sure that the commission was aware that the funding that is proposed in this case would be coming from your unassigned balance from ARP.
Is that from the first tranche?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Mayor Pro
Mayor.
Tem. Mayor Pro Tem, and then the Commissioner from the sixth.
I'll get some clarity on what she just
Okay,
said.
very well. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Administrator Dawes, can you further clarify? So let me just say this as she gets prepared to do that. We are receiving the second tranche of dollars now. And so the first tranche we received, you had a funding or an expenditure plan that was adopted by the commission. That has not happened for tranche 2. All right, Administrator Dowse.
So the $1.2 million that was first approved by the commission as a result of Administrator Donald's recommendation, that has already been set aside. But any additional funding would be coming from your unassigned balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Look. Yeah. So this $2 million he's talking about, the other $1 million would come from the unassigned balance.
Potentially.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm going to ask a series of questions. I'm going to ask Director Welch if he'd approach this microphone here. I want to tie things together, if we may. Last year, the commission, in its efforts, adopted the blight ordinance. On July the 2nd, the city of Augusta hosted a groundbreaking at Maple and Sherman Streets. Dana Lee and I think you were there. And we broke ground on what was to be 11 affordable housing units at the time. Where do we stand on those?
Mr. Mayor, members of the committee and of the commission. So you speak specifically to the Sherman and Maple Street home ownership development. I believe at that time, probably over a year ago, this was an initiative.
July 2nd, 2021.
This was an initiative that was spearheaded by the land bank to that nature. So I would ask you to sort of have them sort of speak on that. However, to this date, you've asked what has been done. Since that time frame, we worked with pretty much one of the prime developers who had been identified to sort of deliver affordable and workforce housing on those sites. You know, HCD has worked in hand with the land bank, with those particular developer, to move forward with the development of the first 2 workforce houses. And to this date, the commission has approved for us to be able to move forward with a financial structuring with HCD is providing 50% of the funding, and the actual developer themselves is infusing the additional 50%. All in all, at the end, what you will have is the beginning of the genesis of this 11 home development started. Also, this is a part of your Twig Street corridor. And of course, from a Twig Street corridor perspective, of course, HCD has completed right there adjacent to this McQueen Court 6 affordable housing from a home investment partnership, and I can go on and on in
Well,
regards
would
to
you
that.
pause?
Yes, sir.
I'm fixated on Sherman and Maple,
Okay.
right there at Good Samaritan Missionary Baptist Church. Keep going back to the church. And across the street, Mill, Cedar, all those streets down the way there. How many of these houses are complete? And if they're not complete, how substantially complete are these?
Once again, I'll start off by saying this was an initiative that was spearheaded by the Land Bank, not
All right,
HCD.
pause there then.
Okay.
Director Edwards, how many homes are completed of this 11?
The single structure that remained, that was not demolished, that was rehabilitated, that one's done. Of your new construction, that developer found themselves in a conundrum when it came to pricing.
You didn't answer my question.
None
How many
of the new
homes?
construction. The single rehabilitation is done.
Okay. Okay. All right, it's going to lead me to, I'm not sure who best to answer this question. I'm going to pose it to Administrator Dowse, and if you want to defer it, then you may be able to do that, because these tasks were given to the finance staff. On April the 28th of 2021, in the month of April, we released what we called the Housing for Working Families package. And in that, there were a series of committee agenda items. We started first with recommendation 1, and that was the Affordable Housing and Workforce Housing Tax Break. We tasked the administrator and the finance team to come back within 90 days of the ask of the creation to tell us whether that was viable or not. Do you know whether or not that is complete at this time, Ms. Dowse?
I do not, Mayor.
Okay. That involved the Finance Department, Planning and Development, Tax Assessor's Office, and other relevant departments in order to develop a property tax incentive. The second one was the Affordable Housing for Families incentive. What data tells us is that there are 3 things that you need in order to create affordable housing in cities. I've heard loosely a part of that today, Director Edwards. It says that you've got to have appropriate zoning that is flexible. It says that you have to have incentives for developers, but then you have to have subsidies, particularly for low and middle income families. We talked about that last year. So my second one, Administrator Dowse, is we tasked the same group, Finance, Planning and Development, the Land Bank Authority, Housing and Community Development, and the Development Authority, to provide the Commission 3 recommendations on selling city-owned parcels that reduce the appraised value for the sole purpose of developing affordable housing. You're loosely stepping into that with the notable exception of you're wanting to be the master developer, effectively. And then, of course, the third recommendation was the whole issue around our zoning ordinance. Where do we stand on those, Administrator Dowse?
Mayor Davis, I don't have a response at this moment. However, I'd be more than happy to get with staff to provide you a comprehensive response.
Okay. Those things are critical to this conversation. Not only are they critical to this conversation, I go back to an article, not even an article, an email that, for whatever reason, reverberates in the theater of my mind from 2007 about the state of our city and how we move people in and move people out. I am extremely concerned about the city itself becoming the largest progenitor of gentrification. I am. I've watched it. I've seen it. We've talked about it, and we've said we wanted to guard against it. And yet we find ourselves in the throes of being the greatest progenitor of it right now. So I want to caution us, not in wanting to provide solutions, but in being much more thoughtful about those solutions. It doesn't matter whether it's Atlanta, Austin, Texas, Savannah, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, Macon, Georgia. There are some basic constructs to bending that arc towards justice and opportunity when it comes to workforce and affordable housing. Those three things, zoning, tax incentives for developers, and subsidies for low to mid-income families, is essential. Doesn't matter where you're at. And I would ask that the administrator go back to those, and they were commission agenda items, and let's get some answers on those things as we are even considering this approach, because they are essential. Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 10th and then 6th.
Did you say 10th? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this is more of a statement than a question, but as I recall, we had $1 million designated to the blighted program. And I guess my question would be, can we redesignate that money to this program, because it seems like that this program will be fast acting upon doing something with the properties as soon as they're cleared, whereas if we clear the property, it seems that we knock down the structure, but then we can't maintain the growth of the property. So could we redesignate that $1 million?
Well, I'm going to defer that to the administrator, but I'm going to go back to, I remember it like it was yesterday, Dana Lynn. I do. The commissioner from the first spoke. Mayor Pro Tem spoke. Former commissioner for Noy spoke. I spoke. Even got in a track hole and simulated breaking, tearing something down. And that was almost a year ago. And I don't have any new product on the ground. I'm concerned, and I would hope that anybody who's on this dais would be equally concerned, and that if those three things that I just talked about, that you're loosely talking about, Director Edwards, are not in place, then we need to fix that. So I'm going to go back to your question that Administrator Dowse is going to answer about, can we repurpose dollars? That's a meaningful discussion. But if I can't build something right now that I broke ground on last year and move people into it, I got a real problem with that. Administrator Dowse.
So Commissioner Clark, the $1 million that you are speaking of has already been allocated to this blight program, which is exactly what Director Edwards is speaking about. Mm-hmm. He's also stating that he will be requesting $2 million, in which the additional $1 million will come from your unassigned balance, which is currently at $10,392,000, and of course some change in dollars. So if approved, that's where the additional $1 million will come from. It is at the Commission's discretion if you choose to reallocate funding.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Chair recognizes the Chairman of Administrative Services, the distinguished Commissioner from the 6th.
Who?
Oh,
He wants
okay.
something.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. Mr. Welcher and Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna kind of look at some of the comments, which I think were excellent comments that you made, or questions that you asked. But Mr. Welcher, I thought on the Maple Street project, you did mention, I thought, and I apologize to you in advance if I misunderstood you, that was two of those projects, two of those homes on Maple Street. Did you say we were about to get started, or did I misunderstand you on that?
Yes, sir, we are. You have approved for us to be able to move forward in agreement with the developer who was a part of that original groundbreaking. So in partnership, we are moving forward with the developer to provide the leverage on the front end as well as the subsidy on the back end, as the mayor indicated, to make that project a go.
So was that the intention at all times for you to work with the developer to, in some form or fashion, to put these 11 homes on the ground?
No, sir, not on the onset.
Sir?
No, sir, not on the onset.
Okay. So they didn't want anything from the city at all?
No, sir, I was not a part of the original groundbreaking, I mean, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, for me, it's just about the partnership it is on the corridor. So, I mean, I don't really want to get into the back and forth, but I think the partnership piece of it.
No, I'm not. I don't want to. But I want to ask another question about that before I move on, and that is it advantageous for you to get involved with it now when you're starting with the two?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's a corridor that we're already developing, familiar with. It's a mixed income type of developmental corridor. So it only makes sense. It eases the burden on the actual developer, as Mr. Edwards indicated, talking about the actual rising costs. It allows for us to be able to come in on the front end from a construction standpoint, as well as to be able to provide that subsidy, that known subsidy, so regardless of who the homeowner is on the back end. It doesn't have to be affordable. We're able to use bond funding, so it's not income restricted. So at the end of the day, what it does is it allows the continuous development of that corridor by providing workforce housing.
Okay. Thank you. So let me. I'm losing track of the figures here. Cause once y'all start counting too fast, I'm slow, so I get lost. So let me ask for clarity here. I had seen this on the agenda for full disclosure here, in terms of our previous Administrator Donald, putting this in the budget, and so I tried to get some clarity around exactly what that looks like. And so with that, I had a conversation with Mr. Edwards to try to see exactly will this get him to where he needs to be. And obviously, like most people would say, when it comes to money, the more money, the faster I can get done what's being requested. And so at that point, I suggested to him that he potentially ask for the $2 million. But like I said, what has been allocated pretty much for all intents and purposes, this has not been voted on, but has been prescribed there, is about, I think, $1 million. One time we saw $1.1 million, but it's actually $1 million now, I think. However, so my question for clarity here, based on what you just said, Ms. Dowse, are we talking about $3 million total, or are we talking about $2 million in total?
Two.
I just heard a $3 million figure from somewhere.
No.
Excuse me, let them answer, please.
Ms. Dowse.
So Commissioner Hassan, you are correct. In the administrator's exit work session presentation, there was a $1 million figure listed under blight/affordable housing. However, later in the presentation, there was a $1.1 million figure that, after speaking with Mr. Edwards, he sent Administrator Donald that spreadsheet which itemized how he would be spending those funds. So although Mr. Edwards at one point did request $1.1 million, the recommendation that was brought before the commission and subsequently approved was for $1 million. And so the clarification question would better be directed at Mr. Edwards as to, is he requesting $2 million in addition to his $1 million that has already been allocated, or is he requesting $2 million, of which $1 million has already been allocated?
You up, Mr. Edwards, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
No, don't mind.
Yes, sir. So the budget that was outlined for you today is a $2 million request. So
And what does it include? Everything?
Yes, sir. So that is the $1 million you saw from the former administrator plus $1 million.
Okay, so
But
we're
we'll
talking-
take 3 if you bless 3.
I told you start talking money, the more you, the numbers just keep moving on. Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Mayor, this is to you, and I think I agree with all your commentary in terms of what you, may mention that have been discussed among and probably approved on the commission. Based on what you hear and see today, Mr. Mayor, could you give us an idea of what you think could potentially make this work? Because you have some data before you that you expound upon. So give us an idea, if possible, that you see this working or some more tweaking needs to be done.
One of the things that is essential to this conversation to even make it real time is the 3 things that I previously asked for that Ms. Dowse is going to work with the team to secure and get for us. Zoning, tax incentives, subsidy. Critical. You have to have those. What's not being discussed is the linchpin called developers. The city of Augusta should not ever, whether I'm the mayor, somebody else is the mayor, whether you're the commissioner from the 6th or anybody, should want to be the master developer. We're just not built for that. What we do have in the private sector are those who can deliver product. What you've just heard is we don't have a developer who can deliver the product today. Director Welcher, again, in his articulation, has expressed we are here to partner with them. Director Edwards said the developer ran into a conundrum. That's a really big word. And because of that, that is a concern. So until you solve that issue around having developers who are poised, who don't need the support other than the tax incentive, but who have capacity to go to lending institutions and say, I'm going to drop 20 units, 30 or 40 units, whatever parcels you have capacity for. Because what you also don't want, and we've not talked about it, is the measure that was being debated in the legislature of where you have these VCs and large investors who are coming into communities and buying up swaths of land to include subdivisions and then renting them out at exorbitant rates to firefighters and teachers to the tune of $2,200 and $2,500 a month. I don't even pay $2,500 a month. Those are the things, Commissioner, that if you're going to create a city of opportunity for everyone, where people want to live, to learn, to work, and to raise their families, those things have to be addressed. You make tangible long-term change through policy. You're policymakers. We started it with the blight ordinance, which was incredible, and now you've got to continue to bend that arc and put policy in place so that Director Edwards, in his willingness and great passion and experiences of having done similar things in other communities, can in fact fully effectuate what he wants to do. Today, we're not there. I'm just going to say that point blank. Today, we're not there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me make a comment around it. Out of all I've heard, and I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, is that as we look across the nation, deep pocket investors, hedge fund personnel, they're buying up all of this property. It does concern me how much we'll be control that element if we get in bed with them. That really does concern me, and because normally they do exactly what they say. They put new structures up, and probably in this market across the country, they seem to be pricing everybody out, not just anybody, everybody out. And in partnering with them for rehab, that may be a new phenomenon. That's not my industry. I take you at your word, but it's the first I'm hearing of it. That don't mean it don't exist. So please, I apologize to you for that, because I'm not insinuating that at all. But to see how do we control that animal, because one thing I'm a firm believer in, is that if I got my money, you can't tell me what I can do with it. I may not want an investor, but if he got the money to purchase that, I can't demand that he does this and that and the other, unless I have some kind of policies in place and a restriction of land mass that I can dictate to him. but a person's resources normally dictate to them. Overall, I'm gonna support what has been suggested to let our interim administrator, get with you all and try to work out the details and stuff, because this is something we do need to do, need to accomplish. We do need to have some rehab homes. We do need to make them more affordable in this day and time, and we need to do it at a rapid pace. But those particulars there, I do think we need to find a way to get those things done and get them done in a real rapid fashion. But it has my support once we can do those kinds of things there and protect us, that we don't become a victim because they have the resources, and then we are displacing folks at the end of the day. We want to be bringing people back in the community and stuff like that, because you got, we're talking about James Brown Boulevard is sitting there waiting where I was born and raised at to be developed. I know it's supposed to have been an apartment complex or something a couple of years now, and that's a whole block there. But then you got Carey Street there, right up the street there. You got 10th Street, you got 11th Street, 12th Street. All those things could be done, and there's plenty of houses sitting there. So there's plenty of room to do what you're talking about. And I'm just hoping and praying that we can get the details in the right order. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner, for putting this on our agenda. Chair recognizes the Mayor Pro Tem to close us out. Our Commissioner from the first, he had more. Let's go to the Commissioner from the first, and then you close us out, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Davis.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Question, what has HCD's role been in this conversation altogether? I see a lot of plans here that resembles a lot of what they're already doing. And so I just want to know, what has been your involvement in this conversation specific to what's in front of us today? And maybe Sean or Hawthorne, somebody answer that question for me.
So since the first presentation of this to request workshop, conversations not only have been exchange of information as it pertains to the presentation, but led through the administrator's office to ensure that her staff are working together, her being my board member, her being interim city administrator. There's not going to be an opportunity for both entities to interact on the exact same project in the exact same way. It's complementary. We're not looking to get into a new construction model. That's the issue that developer on Sherman Street ran into, is because in new construction, price fluctuations may mean that your project stalls and then you got to beg for help. That's why we're dealing with rehabilitation. So it's complementary in every way.
So would there be dual efforts going on at the same time between both departments, so to speak?
Yes. Yes. The work of HCD will not be hindered in any way by what the land bank's going to do.
Okay, all right. I guess my concern is just that it seems like we're creating something, we're duplicating something versus tying together efforts. I could be wrong. That's just what I'm seeing.
Again, you're dealing with blight through the land bank.
Okay.
The end result of a housing product doesn't have to be developed by the land bank itself. Acquisition of the property has to take place because of the state ability of the land bank to get the property. Partnership with private market is in place. Housing counseling is in place, but development activity can operate through any end. And again, at the table in the idea of partnership, as noted by the mayor when he talked about zoning, planning is a part of this. The planning director is one of my board members.
Okay, I yield back, but I see Director Welcher here. Director Welcher, Mr. Mayor.
So I full supportive of the plan that the land bank has sort of put forth. I think that they should definitely continue to serve in the lead capacity. However, there are some things there that I do see that are core competencies of HCD. From a housing counseling perspective, that is a relationship where we already have a citizen empowerment program that sort of speaks to financial literacy that leads to housing counseling. He talked about CSR EOA. That's a relationship that's already there that you've approved. From a subsidy perspective, I think that we could definitely be of assistance to the land bank there. I think also from a rehabilitation perspective, our process allows us to be able to go, our bid process allows us to be able to go from invitation to awarding of a contract in 5 days, from a Monday to a Friday, and then 2 additional days from a signature based on what you have allowed us from a contract perspective. So I think from our perspective, HCD, I've been called up to the mic, definitely didn't expect to speak today, but I think we should, in my opinion, want to assist the land bank. They should serve as lead, but in some aspects of our core competencies, we should pretty much serve as a co-partner with the land bank to help deliver this initiative as we have done and we continue to do in partnership on every other type of development in the urban core as well right now, specifically to your Maple and Sherman that has been discussed today. I yield.
Me? I think I more or less have a statement. We have unspent money in ARP, which is about, you say about $10 million, Ms. Dowse?
That's correct, $10.3 million.
But I know Commissioner Hassan has some initiatives. I have some initiatives. I think Commissioner Johnson has an initiative or two. So I want to caution us before we say we're going to spend another $1 million without looking at the other items that are going to come forth probably starting sometime next week. I'm not saying we don't need to support it. What I am saying is that that $10 million is probably going to go pretty fast when it starts going. I've got some issues to bring forward about Brigham, and other people are concerned about lights across the city that are out and not working at some of our parks and what have you. I understand that's about $5 or $6 million that we may have to spend there. So I'm just saying, let's be cautious. I'm not saying don't do it. You know, if we see where we can do it and we have the money, let's go forward. However, let's look at everything as a whole before we make a decision. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. And Administrator Dowse, do you have any additional comments at this time?
Not to belabor the point, but I did want to make sure the commission was aware that I have met with both Mr. Edwards and Mr. Welcher concerning a spirit of partnership and collaboration. So I do not think that the concerns that were raised will be an issue going forward. And not stating that they have been an issue in the past, but I definitely don't think that will be a concern going forward.
Yeah, I echo that. They've worked hand in glove and glove in hand. I'm aware of that. All right, Director Edwards, closing comments.
Well, let me thank you again for the time and opportunity in order to be able to present this issue to you. I would just take a moment in order to reiterate that at some point in time, upon additional conversation and the opportunity to address your concerns, we will need to drill down into this blight issue. It is opening the door and the opportunity for the investors that you say are buying up our community, which is proven by the transfer of title. Those opportunities exist because we're not dealing with conditions in our communities.
Thank you. Chairman Hassan, thank you for bringing this work session forward. All right, this meeting is adjourned.